Premature.
Maybe there's so many funny things about
Can we
this.
restart this?
You just want to write it down.
Okay, yeah.
No, I'm totally kidding.
Just say it.
Now I really don't know. Are we cool? Did something just happen?
No, was it?
A lot of things just happened, none of them relevant to this round.
Oh, okay.
Are y'all ready?
Yeah.
It just felt like you were holding my hand.
I'm not holding your hand. Wait, honey.
Look, that's not it. Is everyone ready?
Yes, sir. Okay, sorry, I'm ready. See what you guys are doing.
Awesome. It's a resolution. The United States federal government should reinstate the Constellation program for deep space exploration. First is going to be the framework. Critics should vote on the implications of, critics should vote on the team who is most open to difference. Again, the critics should vote on the team who is most open to difference. The ACE point is this breaks down normative structures and closed off and reevaluates closed off mindset. It also illuminates oppression within the round. It also allows us to clear debate space, which allows us to talk about multiplicities of things. The two is that the role of the ballot is the affirmation of the acceptance of these multiplicities. It is also a physical affirmation of the affirmative ideology. The three is that critiques provide us a way to evaluate our epistemologies and our engagement with difference. It is only through the criticism that we are allowed to challenge the normative power structures that we operate under in round as well as in the fiated round, which means like we're arguing that you should prioritize the impacts of the criticism because they come before the epistemologies of fiat. Even in fiat, you should still like prioritize them. We're not saying you can't weigh like your impacts. We're just saying ours are more important.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How does Joey decide who is more open to difference in this round? Like,
It'll be pretty obvious when you hear our case.
Going on to the pieces. One thing's only exist in spaces of difference. The signified is not intrinsic, but is defined by other things. The ACE point is that conceptions of the self are influenced by extrinsic ideas. Only the I only becomes meaningful when there is another form present. This is basically Habermas saying that like our identities are always going to be tied to another. That is like living for death means that we are living to eventually become ourselves. We are always needing to be open to difference, but at the same time we are always intrinsically tied to this difference. The two is this manifests itself in terms of always being afraid of the unknown. We fear what we do not know. The ACE point is that fear of the other lets us also shut out the other when we don't engage with indifference. When we see other people as being different from us, it creates a fear of not only our own individuality and our autonomy, but it also creates violence to the other. The best, like a real world example of this is specifically when George W. Bush implemented like terror talk after 9/11 where he said that all Muslims were a threat to United States sovereignty. He created another, but what he actually did is even people who looked like Muslims, who weren't Muslim, had violence done to them because they were also otherized by this discourse. This is also an example of how the discourse that we have actually shapes the realities in which we operate under. Our next point is when something is not enough like us, this leads to exclusionary politics. You can cross-apply the example from above. The ACE point under this is that being open to the other as a threat allows for a new form of politics rather than assuming that the other is a threat. We allow the other to manifest itself unto us. Basically, we allow this openness, this difference to come unto us, and therefore we break down that boundary and that border between the other. So the advocacy. We are literally defying gravity. We are literally defying gravity. The United States federal government should reinstate the Constellation program for deep space exploration in order to break down the boundary between the other. The United States federal government, it's the resolution.
With?
Like, the reasoning we're doing it is to break down the
Is
other.
that part of your plan text?
No, that's like our solvency. First, solvency.
But can you just read your plan
Yeah,
text?
it's the resolution.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was part.
Yeah. First is going to be solvency. Sending occupied vehicles engages the other because we put our bodies at risk, breaking down the complacent status quo. Basically what we're saying is like putting people in spaceships and sending them into space, which is normally feared, is probably a good way to engage with things that we do not know that we have normally feared. The ACE point is we accept the possibility of a threat. This form of this form of exploration is always open-ended. It's always trying to engage in a space that we do not call our own, but it's also engaging in a space that we do not not see as our own, and therefore that when we normally otherize it, we're now breaking down that boundary, whether it's through like space aliens or whether it's through like planets. We're still engaging with these beings of difference. The two is this breaks down the mindset of politics being good enough and being complacent because we are always doing more. We argue that we can always challenge our assumptions. We can always break down these boundaries when we try to explore and try to open ourselves to the multiplicities of the other. It always allows the other to manifest itself unto us rather than forcing ourselves onto the other. The three is that we engage in a way that, like, again, we don't know if aliens are threats. We are open to all forms of the other, which means we never put up boundaries. The impacts to this is not only do we reform politics. The ACE point of this creates an ethic of always questioning, means that we don't become complacent with the status quo, which means we're always seeking to open up spaces for difference. The B is that othering and exclusion leads to dehumanization when we don't see people as the same as us. This allows us to, literally use them for our own benefits. We do this with the environment because we see that we think that it is like not the same as human beings. We also see this with minority populations when we enslave them to do work for like a capitalist mindset. The BISA point under this is it literally gives no value to life when you only gain your contextuality from another being, and when you recognize that other being is not being the same as you, which means that like we break down the mindset of shutting out difference. We will always be innovative within the status quo.
Can I ask one more question or no?
Yeah, you can ask one more.
How do you guys, like personally in this round, be open to difference? Is it just your plan text, or is there like a critical, like you guys did this?
Yeah, I mean, we're not advocating to close off difference.
Well, we're not advocating that like you should win or anything. I think that would be dumb. But like we're advocating to like open up spaces of difference.
We're gonna.
Was that Sylvia or Maddie?
Maddie.
You were the first person to ask us, and like, I wonder why no one's asking.
All right, are you guys ready?
I'm gonna start time, and then I'm gonna keep talking to Somerset.
Cool.
So we're starting time right now.
Funny thing about that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm just stopping time real quick as I get to the podium. I have 7:41 left. Is that what you guys had?
Close enough.
Yeah, 7:38.
I was at 7:38 as well. We still have 3 freaking seconds, jerk.
So the roadmap is going to be one off. You might want to like. Maybe,
Is it a critique?
no. Well, it's sort of, but it's not. You don't need 5 pages.
Cool. Awesome.
And you might want another sheet handy, depending on how things work out. But we'll put that at the
I have
bottom.
0 sheets.
Oh, right. Tabs. You might want more tabs. Sorry, work it. Sorry.
We're good.
We'll do the one off. We'll do case in order, and then possibly 1 to 2 more.
Rocket.
So, we're ready?
That was.
The 8th one is going to be the overview. In traditional rounds, topicality stands off the plan text, but in this round particularly, we would argue that topicality needs to send off where they're getting their offense from. At the point when their plan text is just an action that they're claiming and not actually where they're getting their offense, we need to have the topicality go wherever the offense is going. So that's where it's going to apply. The B point is going to be the interpretations. That is that deep space equals anything outside of our solar system. Once again, the interpretation is deep space equals anything outside of our solar system. And then the second interpretation is going to be that the constellation program is a manned space flight outside of Earth's orbit. The B point of the violations, the first violation is going to be that they are talking about recognizing the other, but they don't actually engage that on outside of the solar system. They provide no evidence that there is existence out there, or provide any reasons why we should suggest somehow that there is life out there. So the next violation is that they don't actually. We don't have any know if they would go outside of the solar system as far as the constellation program.
Question?
Sure, go ahead.
What are you calling this? The topicality?
Yeah, it's topicality with critical framework. The standards, whatever next letter you have, I think it's the D point of the standard. The first one is going to be that of ground, where it's key to assure negative ground, where we have to have access to this debate round, have argumentation to go against it. We were expecting to talk about the reasons why or why we should not go into deep space, but not talking about like this idea of somehow trying to increase like or have it within their framework of like having the most open to difference. The next argumentation we went to the topic literature is that none of the topic literature talks about any advantage of going to deep space for like gaining a decrease in the otherization or to conquering our fears. We would argue that that has already been solved with the previous manned space flights. The next standard we would argue is that of limits. So this fairly limits the ground on both sides. Now we would argue the voters, the first one's going to be a priority. You can vote here first as a procedural because it's the rules of the game that they have not met their procedural burden within the resolution. The resolution is the epicenter of predictability at the point when they're just they're using the resolution but superficially so in order to talk about their liberation. The next argument we did say is you can vote on the standards debate specifically. So if you feel that any of those standards have been violated, you can vote there. The next argument we would make is the impacts of this debate around decreased education because we're not able to talk about the real impact of going into deep space, and that's going to be a real reason why you're going to see that we have not had the education we need to have this debate around. The next voter here is going to be competitive equity, that we need to have equal access to debate around that they've denied us by being so unpredictable and outside the resolution that's going to collapse debate. The next thing here, I think I have the letter F for the social contract. One, that there's the social contract is this tacit agreement set up by communities or individuals whereby they have certain rules that they follow, and this is going to, we're going to see that the social contract always is designed to prevent violence. The number two under this is going to be that in fact all breaches of the social contract are laced with violence. We can see particularly with colonialism where individuals did not respect the entities that they dealt with, or the countries. We see the next one is rape, that they did not respect the social contract that dealt with bodies, but also economically, that thievery or robbery is representations when they did not respect the private properties of others. All these instances are instances of violence that have come about by the breach of the social contract. The third point under this is going to be that the resolution equals a social contract within debate. This is the epicenter of predictability as mentioned earlier. This is where we come to talk about things, and specifically about that is like what we're planning to talk about. The fourth one is going to be that the violations represent the breach in the social contract, and the standards and the voters are reasons specifically where the violence has occurred at the point when we're not getting the education that we signed up for this round. That's going to be a reason why you're going to be able to vote on this, but also we would argue that it's just in the rules of the game, specifically the number one under the voters is why you're also going to be able to vote on this. The fifth point is going to be denied solvency because they talk about liberation, they talk about the decrease in the otherization of others, but at the point when they're not able to do that because of the violence that has occurred, they're continuing to oppress and otherize us as the negative team, which is going to be a reason why you're never going to be able to, they're never going to be able to get into solvency. The sixth point under here is going to be that there is no difference between in-round and real world violence. That is the same in this case because of the violence that they chose by their affirmative case. Now, the G point, the alternative. The text is endorsed topicality not only as a procedural argument that is a check on abuse, but as a mechanism of self-liberation by which Somerset and I make a stand against the oppression of their advocacy. Once again, endorse topicality as a procedural argument that is a check on abuse, but as a mechanism of self-liberation by which Somerset and I makes a stand against their oppression, the oppression of their advocacy.
Copy, please.
Somerset will work on that.
Just read it again.
I'll read it again. Okay, endorse topicality as not only as a procedural argument that is a check on abuse, but as a mechanism of self-liberation by which Somerset and I make a stand against the oppression of their advocacy. All right, each one is a solvency. The first one is going to be running topicality with a critical framework. We get all the benefits of the topicality, but also of discussing liberation, but also of our own performance. This is going to be a real reason why you can vote on the topicality and how we're going to be able to solve the oppression. By voting nay, you really do end the violence and the oppression that's occurred in this debate round. The second point under here is going to be that any kind of violence that they claim by us running this position is reciprocal and violent. Is reciprocal in nature. It's only occurred because of their affirmative plan, which means that it's reciprocal violence is allowed within a social contract. The third point is going to be that you, by standing up and voting for the negative team in this instance, you will allow it to stand against all oppression, and it is the first step and allows you to solve essentially for the oppression worldwide, because as you take a stand against the oppression that has occurred right now, right here in your eyes, it's this, like it spreads worldwide, it moves, you can, and in fact, solve for all oppression. The fourth point is going to be that their liberation should not come at the expense of our freedom. If so, immediate violence has occurred. So you can't vote for their critique on, or that's good. You want me to go to the counterplan now, or you want me to go to the case? Okay, now, new sheet, we're going to go counterplan. Pass the plan except the mining operations on planets and asteroids. Once again, pass the plan except mining operations on planets and asteroids.
Status?
Status, Somerset?
Unconditional.
Unconditional. The first one is going to be that currently what are we calling, the Constellation Program allows for mining and is planned for mining on asteroids and planets. We would say that this is exploitation and creates differences between their ecosystems and ours. It's always going to lead to, it's basically going to function as an also disadvantage case. Is a reason why you're never going to be able to vote for them, because it continues the oppression of the other. If there are in fact features in the world out there, we're going to oppress them because of the Constellation Program. The two under here is going to be that we see space as a resource to be used and taken, which means that we're always going to be continuing like the cycle of violence that occurred on Earth, where we oppress others and take their things by taking the things of the creatures that live, or the things that live in space. This is the internal link to otherization and consumption. Is going to be able to be how we're going to be able to solve the root cause, because we can actually engage with the other without stealing their resources, which is going to be key. Now, onto the framework specifically, we would argue that their framework does not allow, is like not clear about how you're like where you're actually voting and how you're going to be able to like decide who is more open and whatnot. And we would the next argument we would make is net benefits is best because it's most predictable. It's what's typically run in debate rounds. That's the number one. The number two is going to be that it's most real world, because we have to evaluate our decisions based on what's like consequences and actions. And they're with the third one or fourth argument. The number is going to be that these ideas could be weighed in a net beneficial level, but they're not allowing us to do it, which is going to be an inherent reason to their oppression against us. We would also argue specifically on their solvency that it's a term because it's more oppressive, because it's going to leave the resource grab of the others, but we'd also argue that it oppresses, anything last minute, all right.
All right, the order's going to go. How did you flow their first few sheets?
In a big long line.
Okay, then I'm just going to go that same order.
Okay, I can move things around really easily.
The only thing that I would move around is the counterplan page.
Okay, yeah, I have a counterplan on its own thing.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, so let's do the counterplan first.
Okay.
And then we'll go the T stuff in order. And then our critique, or our affirmative, with the same order.
Cool.
Can you say that one more time for me?
Yeah. So counterplan, and then the T arguments order, and then our case arguments order.
Oh, sorry, counterplan T
Case.
case.
Okay. Okay. Is everyone ready?
I am.
All right. Oh, I need timer. Okay.
Just so we're clear. Counterplan case T.
No, counterplan T case.
Cool.
Okay. All right. First what? Okay, hold on.
Awesome.
There's a glitch in the matrix.
Okay. Growing up, it's going to be pretty easy to vote for the affirmative team when our alternative solves back not only for the entirety of the counterplan, but also we can perm this back and get net beneficial solvency. So the first perm here is first perm is going to be embrace the mestiza mindset, ideas and discourse for how we create ourselves. Only when we recognize the mestiza identity and that it is not homogeneous.
Please.
Excuse me.
Firm text, could you please?
Yeah, embrace the mestiza mindset. Only when we recognize the mestiza identity and that it is not homogeneous, but is a tolerance of ambiguity, and we acknowledge our internal contradictions. Acknowledge our internal contradictions? We need to embrace the parts of ourselves that are painful. This is the only way to bring us to the end of things like violence and the specific violence that they talk about, because it's a way to give us a source of power. The space in between the things that we say we can and cannot do gives us a source of power and responsibility, which creates a new consciousness that is not fixed and allows us to have two contending ideas that can and should survive on the borderlands of our affirmative and their negative plan. The perm is a good idea because the affirmative and negative can co-construct one another and recognize the mutuality, the mutual constitution in the nature of the affirmative and the negative. So that's a pretty good net beneficial reason. Also, second perm, where's the perm? Let's see. Perm pass the plan, so perm do the plan, and contemplate mining. Do the counterplan and contemplate with the exception of mining operations on planets and asteroids.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so perm do the plan and contemplate doing the plan except mining operations on planets and asteroids. We argue that this is critical to allow for opening of new sources of opportunity and education. This allows for the most critical thinking in the round because it allows for us to contemplate whether our actions are good or bad, but we're still doing the plan, which means that we solve back for the entirety of the case, which counterplan actually
Could you please explain your first perm, what was it, net set, mindset?
Mestiza.
Mestiza mindset. It's a great way for us to analyze our internal contradictions and give us a source of power so we can do things that we think are like things that we cannot do. So you say, you can't perm. So we say, that gives me a source of power to do exactly the opposite and utilize our plan to leverage against that, which means that like we're like able to exist on the
Why don't you
border.
throw the Derrida one on there?
Okay, what is that one?
Just like that there's space between sign and play, like that rupture
All right.
we can play with.
Third perm, Derrida perm, Deridian perm. There's space between time and play, and space between sign and play, which means that we can do both and allow the affirmative and the negative to construct. The net benefit to this perm is that it allows us to not only garner the entirety of the case solvency, but it also opens up the opportunity to accept difference where they close it off, which is a disadvantage to the counterplan. It also is a reason, beneficial reason as to why you need to do the perm in this instance. They try on solvency.
What's your text of the third perm, your official text? Deridia perm? Deridia perm?
Deridian.
Is the text.
They try to say they solve back to the root cause because they engage, but this doesn't mean that they're solving back to the root cause of difference or actually garnering any solvency for the affirmative. The counterplan exists in a completely different realm from the affirmative because they do not actually function in a way that solves back for the harms of the status quo or actually solve back for the closing off of repression and difference, which means that when they say they try to talk about like exploitation of difference, what do you want to say about? Do you have anything
In
else?
what?
Like to their solvency. Do you have anything else you want to say?
I mean, like I would argue that the mindset that we create, we argue that we create a mindset shift, which would like break this down, right?
Okay. Not only does the affirmative advocacy solve back better because we create and control the internal link to a mindset shift in breaking down these binaries that individuals have in their brains of constructing the fear of the other, but instead we break this down and roll it back, whereas the counterplan still uses the same kind of mindset that causes this difference to be feared. Okay? Alright, now to this totality.
Question?
Item 10. First counter-interpretation. One, we meet your interpretation, deep space, we're talking about anything outside the solar system. And also, counter-interpretation, the affirmative must pass a plan the affirmative could pass a plan including the solar system. They never give any resolutional basis as to why this can't happen. I want to perm the interpretations because we can do both, because both interpretations are good for the debate, but also theirs does not limit out anything. So there's no reason as to why the the topicality in fact means anything, because we still meet their interpretation. They say second interpretation that's very true. Second counter-interpretation. The affirmative's only burden is to prove that the resolution is true. We meet this interpretation, in fact, is the most predictable in the debate because it is, one, we are the apex of the resolution by actually advocating for the resolution, which means that there's no ground skew or prep skew because we are the resolution, but also it means that we meet back your second interpretation about manned space flight because that is exactly what the constellation program is. So thank you for bringing that up because it's exactly what we're doing. We advocate for the resolution in the constellation program. You say that we violate because we don't get engaged outside of the solar system. You never asked if that's true, but also even if you don't buy that, we still argue that the affirmative does embrace life outside. You can cross-flight from our affirmative. Maddie talks about this a lot about how we're able to bring manned flights. Like she specifically says that in her speech, that bringing specific people is a great way to break down this fear and construction of fear. Which means that we don't violate your second violation about where you say that we don't know if you're going outside of the solar system, which means that we're actually advocating for people to go out there. On your standards, cross-play the argument made above that we are giving you the best ground in the round, in fact increasing your ground by having the affirmative be the exact resolution. We are not breaking off any part of the resolution, which would have been your ground. On your literature standard, there is literature on it. Read Derrida. Saying that it's been solved is specifically a link to our affirmative, meaning that you're using to question government. We control the internal link to questioning our all these inquiries and being inquisitive, whereas you don't do it. This is a priori. We are the apex of the resolution. We are topical. I don't understand why there's any reason to vote us down. Also, we're reasonably topical. You have to be 100% sure that we're not the resolution in order to vote us down. Don't privilege their education or what they consider education because we provide the best critical education in this round through our affirmative because we force them to think and we are strategic in our efforts and actually allow for them to run this argument. On the social contract business, there's no proven abuse, no reason as to why our violation is paramount or parallel to the violence that happens when other social contracts are broken. T is not the same as a social contract. T is like, it's a rules game, as you say, but like T in this round is telling us what we can and cannot run, and we are saying that we are the resolution. We advocate for the res. Everything that we say is a justification for why the resolution is true, why it should be passed, which means that when you say that, when you cross-play your standards, I want you to look here, that there's no proven abuse or why you should vote us down on the social contract theory. Their standards and their voters don't mean anything. On their alternative specifically, I want you to cross-play the season mindset perm here as to how we can do this and stand against oppression and also endorse this, endorse topicality as like a process that checks out abuse. We're not abusing you, we still need this, we still sell back. Also, cross-play are salty on the R to R advocacy that when conceded that we sell back for openness, which means that we saw the entirety of your affirmative and allow for Maddie and I to work with our advocacy. You minimize also, you reduce your oppression to the same type of oppression of hundreds of thousands of people who are like of minority status or also experience oppression. Yeah, who are marginalized, which means you reduce this and create more violence. Framework, like cross-fire framework arguments about queering debate space, net benefits are not best will be so solved.
Cool.
Topicality. Counterplan. Case. Question was that? Gotcha. On the topicality proper, when you stand across the we meet argument, furthermore, once you drop down to the argument, they say that you've never voted on topicality, this is 100% proven. This is a reason not to vote on topicality altogether. There's no offense on a piece of paper, there's no reason to ever manifest itself into new offense in the next speech. There's no reason that this would be a reason to reject the negative team. They make a permutation, there's no reason to permutation as a voter, it's just a check on saying it's not competitive. We'll concede that the topicality and the theory based on it is not competitive. That's not a reason to vote. They say that that we reduce ourselves to the same level of oppression as individuals. There's no impact to this argument. There's no reason that will become a new impact in the next speech. Go to the counterplan. Anything else you want me to say on that? That's good. Oh, they said that we linked to the affirmative as well on that piece of paper. That was a blip. There's no, it'll be discussed later, but there's no reason that would be a voter. On to the counterplan. They're going to defend their advocacy by the way means on there. Defending their plan text is their advocacy. Now look to our alternative, our counter plan, which is essentially a pick. They say that they can perm it. However, you're going to see that none of these perms are going to work. And at the end of the round, through either net benefits or their framework, the counter plan is preferable to the plan. Okay. And they say the overview is the alternative solves. And that the perm can happen. We'll answer the perm stuff. There's no reason that their advocacy, which apparently is not an alternative, solves for our counter plan. That doesn't make any sense at all. I think you should reject this argument. Drop down to their first term. Okay, perm. First argument, okay. First, all their perms, group them. Number one, these are entirely intrinsic, Joey. They are adding words to the permutation text, which means that they're no longer perms. Permutations are a specific mathematical term that is used in debate to test competition of two competing ideas. The only way there's a legitimate perm is if you have the entirety of the affirmative text and all or most of the negative text and nothing else in this permutation. First argument. So they're entirely intrinsic. The reason intrinsicness is bad is because you always add stuff to the text in order to get out of the offense, meaning that they would always be a shifting target. This is going to operate both through the fairness level. It's a reason to reject the permutation because it's bad for debate, but furthermore, they're claiming critical impact and saying that they're changing for real world changes. I think you can cross-apply some of the arguments from the violence that's based on exclusion and how that means you'll never solve from they're like the 5, 6, and 7 arguments on the critical portion of the topicality. You can cross-apply those arguments as to why excluding us would be in-round violence. It would be the biggest impact. This is the biggest impact in the round. Mitchell highlights it is real round violence. They're not ever accessing this on the flow. They're not ever explicitly telling you this. Furthermore, on the next argument is that now we'll do the line by line proper on the permutation. So, Essentially, our first permutation is that we should do this because we're told we can't do it. However, I would say turn the arguments on the social contract that can be cross-applied here, meaning that there are actually reasons why you should do what you're supposed to do in this particular instance. In the debate setting, it's good to have provide ground and not commit violence within the round against your opposing team. This is going to be better for education, also always going to be better for allowing access and preventing in-round violence, which we're all highlighting as important. Next argument is they say embrace the mindset. There's no reason they embrace the mindset. Look, their plan text is a plan text. I think this has been pretty clear throughout the round through the cross-examination during the PMC and the MG strat, where they say that we are doing all these things, meaning they are advocating their plan text, meaning their plan text in a vacuum will never change mindsets. There's no reason to evaluate this argument. Next argument that will just acknowledge painful contradictions. Sure, you must acknowledge painful contradictions. The painful contradiction only becomes painful once you lose the round because your plan is not superior to our counter plan. It's not a reason the permutation functions. Furthermore, this isn't a permutation at all because there's nothing to do with the resolution or neither the affirmative or the negative. Next argument is this permutation is severance. They're severing out the entire plan. This is abusive to us because it skews our ground. After Mitchell reads the strat and the LC, which is the most important speech, it's not a chance to engage them with offense. Then they change their plan text by entirely taking it out of the plan text, meaning they don't advocate. I think this is an independent voter. You can say that if you go for this permutation, you're severed from your plan text, meaning you get voted down for that. They say that you cannot do the plan. Okay. They say that we should bring people out from the borderlands. What they're essentially doing with these borderland arguments is usurping our ground, saying your plan text is now the borderlands of our plan text, and we're just going to steal it. That is abusive to us. You can cross-apply the reasons why that's bad. They say we must construct another. There's no reason this permutation constructs another. The abuse and the in-around stuff is going to be more important. Our argument on the social contract is that happens immediately in the real world emanating from this round, so your otherization arguments are going to have no effect. Second permutation. They say plan and contemplate mining. First of all, contemplate doing the counter plan is intrinsic. You can cross-apply the arguments. This is why it's intrinsic. Next argument, they never give us an actual text. There's a plan flaw with this. Next argument, they say it's critical to new education. They don't explicitly tell us what it is. They seem to be operating on a mindset that we are not advocating for the same thing that we are. However, you look to our plan text, our counter plan text, where we specifically say plan. So we are usurping all your solvency arguments. You never highlight mining as being a key difference between the affirmative and the negative, meaning that if mining is not a key internal link to solving, then it's going to be a net benefit for the counter plan. Now, furthermore, on the second permutation still, they say there's no solvency on counter plan because we're not engaging in the same way they are. There's no explanation. I think them being held to the plan text is a better standard. Furthermore, I've already said the cross application or the questions about this seem to indicate that they should be held to this standard. Anything else in that permutation?
No, you're good.
Oh yeah, also that permutation wouldn't function because they're going to do plan, which means mine little colonies, and then contemplate not mining little colonies, meaning you still link to our exploitation arguments. Derrida perm. First, severance. There's no part of the plan text. They don't even have a plan text. Their perm text is Derrida. I don't think Derrida is in the affirmative plan, but he's definitely not all of the affirmative plan if he resides there. They say that it's a space between time to reconstruct. That's interesting. However, our severance arguments and intrinsic arguments are more important in our prior question because we are actually talking about real-world impacts that are coming from this room that are happening right now, as opposed to you talking about future impacts where we can reconstruct and change mindsets that might cause something. However, ours are more immediate and of greater magnitude. They also say that the difference is key and that you can't function to solve. These are arguments on the counter. Sorry, okay. These are arguments now on the counter plan. I floated one together. That there's no difference, and you don't solve for difference. However, we do solve for difference because out of the PMC, you expect all the reasons your plan text solves for difference are look to our counter plan text. It is your plan text, meaning we solve the only reason you wouldn't be is the mining, but you don't talk about that entirely. The MG, meaning this debate is functionally over. They say that the mindset shit is key. This is back to, and when we break down barriers, so do we. We solve the entirety of these arguments. Now, I want you to extend the internal linkage that consumerism and looking at things as looking at places as resources and not as having intrinsic good as the key internal link to consumerization, which is how you get to otherization. This is an argument that they have a nuh-uh. They say their response is nuh-uh. They say there's no difference. However, I think it's really important that when we see things as less than, when we see things as exploitable resources, we give them no intrinsic worth. This justifies dehumanization both on the level of the environment, which leads to catastrophic impacts in our relationship to the other of nature. Furthermore, it also destroys our ability to understand each other, and this leads to violence that they're talking about, meaning that we have a straight case turn on our counter plan. This is also a reason to reject every permutation, Joey, because if you buy that they're not intrinsic for some wild reason, then they would be permanent a turn, which would make the permutation net detrimental vis-a-vis our counter plan in itself, which is not linked to the permutation. So we exclude this consumerism. Mitchell, anything else you want me to say on the counter plan sheet? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, they said we don't solve for case. I've already explicated that. Anything else?
Got it.
There's no real warrants on how we don't access their case. I think that, like, the plan text side by side explains how we do, and their PMC explains that also. Now go to the framework page. They don't even get to here in time. I want you to extend Mitchell's number 4, that ideas can be weighed in net benefits, meaning it's preferable framework. Their response is not cross-apply our arguments. However, you're not interacting our arguments. Mitchell tells you it's real world and they're preferable. You have no answer to this on the flow. Also, drop down. We're saying that resources turn your thesis, meaning that even in a net benefit paradigm, we turn you. In your framework, we turn you. And either way, the counterplan is preferable to the advocacy out of the PMC, meaning you're voting no.
The order is going to be, I guess, a brief overview and then just counterplan in case. Everybody's ready?
Say that one more time.
Overview, counterplan in case.
Okay.
Joe, you've got a real easy decision to make here on this round, because what you have is you have the potential to solve, like in either framework that they're presenting you, this idea to solve for openness or to solve for net benefits. And in either world, you're going to be able to vote negative on the plan, basically on the counter plan, but additionally we would argue in any, on the case itself as well, because of the turn that is there. What we see on the counterplan specifically is I want you to look at Somerset's analysis about how all of their perms are either intrinsic or separate. Well, all of their perms are intrinsic, and then some of their perms are severance, and he provides you voters of reasons why you're never going to be able to prefer them. He also explains to you how that these do not serve as a test of competition because of the fact that they're all intrinsic. At this point, it means you have to reject all of these perms, which means the counterplan stands. Look to the analysis, which is just better about how you can't exploit these ecosystems in space without like dehumanizing the other, which means that even in their framework we're going to be able to be more open and receptive to them because we're not trying to steal all the resources, but it means even in our framework we'll be better because we're not dehumanizing or like deorganizationally, like if they're an organism, however you would say that, like destroying their way of life. De-rocking them, yeah, there we go. Which means that you're going to be able to prefer the negative team. Specifically looked at Somerset's analysis on all these firms about how you're going to be able to reject them. You're not going to let them get up here and try to extend somehow some kinds of ideas about how they can, like, how intrinsicness is good or severance is good. Those are too late. They should have brought those up earlier on. Plus, you're going to look at the concessions on the social contract page, where Somerset cross applies the analysis about how the in-round violence has occurred, and that is a reason to reject them right there. You cross-apply those impacts, which, when dropped, at that point you're going to be able to see that you can vote right there just for them running these intrinsic firms. At the very least, you're going to reject them, if not the whole team. But also, we would argue that the counterplan solves the difference between the two cases. Somerset's analysis is beautiful about how they don't have any reasons why mining is key for decreasing the otherization. So we would argue that it's not in fact key, that it is, in which they go completely dropped about how it actually destroys their ecosystems and is bad for them. And we would argue that that is a reason why you're going to be able to vote nay in this round. Also, so it's just at the bottom of the counterplan extends Somerset's argumentation about how you're going to reject each perm and how this exploitation leads to dehumanization. However you define dehumanization, obviously, it would be different. Even if you don't buy the counterplan, somehow, even if you look to the perms, you're going to see that the perms themselves are not going to be preferable because of the framework page. It goes completely dropped about how you should be in a net beneficial paradigm and you shouldn't be looking to which one is more open, which means that even if in this framework you're still going to vote nay because you're going to see that at a net beneficial level, stealing the ecosystems from the organisms in space is bad because of all the analysis that we provide you about how it allows us to Somerset's analysis about how it's dehumanizing because it basically allows us to consume all of their things, that it's the internal link to violence against them, which means that at a net beneficial level you're never going to prefer plans because of these links into dehumanization and that turn there. Which means that at the end of the day, what you have is you have a counterplan that solves better than the affirmative team's plan for what their harms are. Their harms are talking about the openness, the problems of otherization. The counterplan solves better. It is the way to go. It avoids the harms. And did you have? I was just going to see what they're going to say. And if they try to get up here and they try to talk about these perms, it's just not going to work because of the analysis provided about how they're intrinsic, about how they're severance, about how those are reasons why to reject the perms. They have no way out. You're not going to allow them to get up here and try to talk about how somehow this mining is key to decreasing otherization. and that's going to be the reason why you're going to prefer the counter plan over the plan.
Cool. Just gonna go overview on top. Framework. T, I just need the link. Like, I'm just gonna be referencing the link. Our thesis, our advocacy, the counter plan, the impacts page.
Can I ask you a question?
For sure.
I forget how you feel about.
Do call points of order.
Do call points of order. It's been a
So
while.
overview, framework, the topicality, the thesis, our advocacy, counter plan, impacts page. Ready?
Yeah.
Ready? There are 3 really easy reasons why you get to vote for the government team in this round. First is the K alternative completely solves. When they drop that we create a disruption in the mindset shift that the government currently has, not only do we solve back for the implications of the counter plan, but they also drop that we have a net benefit of creating more openness to otherization. This mindset could also solve back for all of the implications that they put on the counter plan. But secondly, they're probably going for the counter plan. In fact, they stood up and went really hard for it. Not only do I get golden answers to all of their terms, which I'll cross-apply from our thesis page, but also the counter plan, as Sylvie makes the argument, is always an affirmation of closing off difference to the other. Like, just because we don't interrogate like these new planets, just because we don't interrogate these new systems, means that we are always limiting ourselves, which means the counter plan doesn't have any solvency. I'll get to that later. Which means 3, our impacts are always going to outweigh. Okay, on to the framework. I just need you to flow across that. Just flow across. Critiques provide us with a way to evaluate our epistemology. This means that the criticism is always going to come first. This means that the implications of the criticism is going to come first, but this means on a larger world scale, you always have to look to the impacts of stopping.
Sorry, Mitchell's number 4 is directly responsive to this. There's no MG interaction between those arguments.
Your response.
I mean, they specifically talk about how net benefits is probably a good thing, but I'm talking about the way in which we get to weigh our impacts.
Yeah, so that would be new.
Okay.
347 would be new.
So go on, okay. Yeah, go on to the topicality. All I want you to extend across is that they link into the criticism. They say that we don't really explain this, but we say by saying that this has already been solved in the status quo, it probably means that you shut down the mindset shift, which also means that you can never solve back through the counter plan. I'll apply that. The most important thing is that they 100% link into the criticism because they stop the questioning and stop the ideology of difference, which means they're always going to be creating the impacts from happening.
Point of order. I have out of the MG that this is a link to the affirmative, no specification of what it is or what that link means.
Okay,
and
your
specifically that
response.
doesn't
I get what you're
solve
saying.
it.
Your response.
Sylvie specifically said that you link because you refuse to recognize that the government needs a mindset shift.
Which answer is that?
It dropped down to, they say, would have already solved already. Sylvie says, you relink because you are saying that, it's
I'll look
already
through the
solved.
flow. Let me make a note real quick.
Sticky tab.
Say the point of order one more time.
Okay, the point of order was that out of the MG, there's no specification on how we link or what the impact of the link is, and the
Yeah.
PMR, that link becomes, now you don't solve because of it. That's the portion that's extremely important to know.
Cool. I will take that into consideration and figure that out.
Cool. Go to our thesis page. Okay. Our entirety of the thesis basically talks about how the conception of the self is defined by the I. That means, the only way that we have the ability to define what we are is by who is meaningly present, who is presented apart from us. This means that the counter plan only exists in a world of the plan. This is an answer to their intrinsic permutation block. The counter plan only exists in the world of the plan. This means that the plan is inherently part of the counter plan because it is defined by what the counter plan is not. The counter plan is also defined by the plan, which means not only are none of these perms intrinsic, it also means that inherently the perm is part of the counter plan, meaning that we gain solvency. Okay. Go to our advocacy. I'll be cross-applying that on the counter plan page.
Great.
Flowcrest, we're the only ones who can create the best mind shift because we stop the complacency of the status quo. We argue, specifically Sylvie argues back that not interrogating, like mining, by not putting ourselves on these planets would be a stop in the status quo. This would be a stop in the rupture of the mindset, which means like you can never solve through the counterplan. So go to the counterplan.
Point of order. Sorry, like that argument is something we talked about the whole round, we tried to get it from you.
Your
The argument
response.
that we specifically can only solve, as in the affirmative can only solve, is not explicated until now.
Your response.
I mean, it goes dropped from the first speech, and I'm pretty sure Sylvie extends all of our
What's the
policy
argument?
and the advocacy.
All right, taken under consideration.
Cool. Okay. Go to the intrinsic perms. The perm we are going for is the mestizo mindset. We recognize that there are different internal contradictions. We recognize that while there is the ability to have a plan, and while there is ability to have a counter plan, there is something crucial, and there is space that we can play with between that is open for interpretation. This is the openness that we are talking about. This is the openness that needs to be brought into the status quo to create this mindset shift. Not only that, but we also argue that,
Intrinsic perms are good.
okay, intrinsic perms, good luck.
If you buy that we are intrinsic.
Even if you buy that we are intrinsic perms are good. One, our perms are a prior question because we test the ideology. Bad epistemology needs to happen to be evaluated before case. The two is that we challenge the mindset, which means our perms are critical to increasing education. They don't say what part of our perms are intrinsic, and so we're not severing. We're only challenging our ideologies. We are still using our original ideology, which means we're definitely not severing out of this. The perm exists on an entirety of a different level of the ideas of case and counterplan. This is a new open space, a new space for difference. We also argue that this is a relink into the criticism when you say that we cannot perm because it is a closing off of difference, which means that you relink into our criticism, which leads to the impacts of case. Also, the Derridian perm. Derrida basically talks about how there is a space in between the structure and the sign, the signifier and the signified. Between that space, we can perm those ideologies. We can take the ideology of openness. We can take the ideology of not exploiting the environment, of not exploiting others, and we can play with that space in between. And the net benefit to that is we increase more openness at the point where we asked you at the beginning of the ballot to vote for the team who is most open to this open space, who de-otherizes the best. You were always going to be voting for us on this perm.
So we're not intrinsic because we maintain our same ideology.
We're not intrinsic because we maintain our same ideology. You can cross-apply what I also said on the thesis that the counterplan is needed for the plan, which means the plan is already a piece of the counterplan no matter what. At the end of the day, you can weigh the criticism, which leads to a decrease in reformation, which leads to reformation of politics, creates an ethic of always questioning, but also comes first against the counterplan that does not have solvency, that is actually a relink into the criticism.
Cool beans.
Always fun.
Debate.
It's all lowercase. Oh, sorry.
What you call M something?
Yeah, we're mixing it up, Marina.
It's almost like
We're all
ours.
TMs.
And you and Summers,
Me and Summers,
I mean, you and Julia.
you like two, yeah.
Maybe not. Yeah, the two, yeah.
That was confusing.
You can
Two
have
TMs.
those. I'll let it have to say people.
Oh, who should stop recording?
I mean, what Joey's.